morning students. Welcome to Adarsh Viii online class. Class 8, Subject Science, Unit 8, Organization of Life. In the last class we have learned about the different organs of respiratory system. Today we are going to study about how the breathing process takes place and also about certain physiological activities such as homeostasis, diffusion, etc. We need oxygen for various body activities. Air enters into the body through the openings of the nose, that is called a nostril. It flows through the nasal cavity and enters into the windpipe and then get filled into the lungs. The process of taking oxygen-rich air into the lungs is called inhalation. The process of expelling air rich in carbon dioxide outside the body is called exhalation. Together, inhalation and exhalation is called breathing. Let us understand the process of breathing through a simple experiment. Mechanism of breathing in human beings. Let us understand the process of breathing through a simple experiment. Take a transparent plastic bottle, remove its bottom. Then take a rubber cork, Y-shaped plastic tube and two deflated balloons. Now to each fork-end of the tube, fix the balloons. Cap the bottle with cork. Put the tube attached to the balloons inside the bottle from its open bottom. Make a hole in the cork and pass the open end of the tube outside the bottle through the hole. Now tie a rubber sheet at the bottom of the bottle tightly so that no air can pass through it. Pull down the rubber sheet and watch the balloons get inflated. Now push the rubber sheet inside the bottle and watch balloons collapse. How do the balloons get inflated and deflated when we pull or push the rubber sheet? When we pull the rubber sheet outwards, the space inside the bottle increases and the air inside the bottle becomes lighter. So the dense air rushes into the balloons from outside. The air enters the tube through the opening outside the bottle. Then the air travels through the tube and enters the two branches of the tubes and into the balloons. When we push the rubber sheet inside, the space in the jar is reduced and the pressure is increased. This pushes the air out of the balloons. The balloons get deflated. Now let us see how this correlates to the breathing system. The bottle is like a human body. There is an empty space or a cavity inside the body filled with air called as body cavity. The rubber sheet is in the diaphragm which divides the body into two parts. The upper part is the chest cavity and the lower part is the abdominal cavity. The Y-shaped tube is the trachea and the bronchi. The balloons are like the lungs which are situated in the chest cavity. Now let us see what happens in our body. The opening of the tube outside the bottle is the opening in the nose, which is the nostrils. When diaphragm goes down, it makes the chest cavity larger. In the same manner, when we pull the rubber sheet, the space inside the bottle gets larger. The oxygen-rich air from outside enters the windpipe through the nostrils. It happens just like what we saw in the experiment. Air enters the bronchi, like the air enters into two branches of the tubes in the experiment. Then finally air goes to the lungs and the lungs get inflated as the balloons in the experiment. Similarly, when we push the rubber sheet or the diaphragm, it moves the air up and the cavity becomes denser. there is more pressure on the balloons or the lungs and air gets out of the body through the same path as before. That means from lungs to the bronchi, windpipe, nasal cavity, nostrils and finally out of the body. Thus, the breathing is controlled by the movement of diaphragm. Diaphragm is a membrane which is present between the chest cavity and abdominal cavity. The movement of diaphragm is controlled by a group of muscles. In humans, breathing involves two main steps, that is inhalation and exhalation. Taking in air which is rich in oxygen is called inhalation. During inhalation, the diaphragm moves down, that is contracts, the rib cage expands. This leads to the expansion inside the lungs. When the diaphragm contracts, the volume of the thoracic cavity increases. As a result, the oxygen-rich air from outside enters the lungs through the nostrils and then to the alveolar sacs. Giving out air which is rich in carbon dioxide is called exhalation. During exhalation, the diaphragm moves up, that is relaxes. The rib cage contracts. This leads to contraction of the lungs. When the diaphragm relaxes, the volume of the thoracic cavity decreases. As a result, the carbon dioxide rich air moves out of the lungs through the same path but in the opposite direction. A human adult at rest on an average breathes about 28,800 times per day, that is 12 to 20 times per minute. Difference between inhalation and exhalation. In inhalation, the muscles of the diaphragm contract. Exhalation, the muscles of the diaphragm relax. In inhalation, the diaphragm goes downward. Exhalation, the diaphragm goes upward. In inhalation, the ribs move upwards and outwards. But in exhalation, the ribs move downwards. In inhalation, the volume of thoracic cavity increases. But in exhalation, the volume of thoracic cavity decreases. In inhalation, the air enters the lungs through the nose. In exhalation, air goes out of the lungs through the nose. Next topic is homeostasis. Homeo means same, stasis means stable. Homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal state in a changing environment. In simple terms, homeostasis could be referred as a balance in a system to maintain a stable internal environment for the survival of an animal. If the homeostasis regulates successfully, our life continues successfully. If the homeostasis is unsuccessful, death or disasters will occur. In order to help you to understand homeostasis, let us see few examples. Human beings are warm-blooded in nature. That is, they maintain their body temperature as constant. 98.6 degree Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius is constant temperature. When this temperature rises, sweat is produced to bring the temperature down. When this body temperature lowers, heat is produced by the muscle or by shivering. So this is an example for homeostasis. Like that, the control of blood sugar level is another example in which the insulin hormone is secreted whenever the blood glucose level is rises, and glucagon hormone is secreted whenever the blood glucose level reduces. Next is diffusion. Diffusion is the movement of particles from the region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration. Let us study the process of diffusion with an activity. We know what happens when a drop of ink is added to a glass of water. The single dark color ink spreads when added to water and the dark blue color fades slightly. If we see at the molecular level, the ink molecules which are compactly packed in the single drop get a chance of dispersing in a larger area when added to the water. This is nothing but the process of diffusion, and we know that the dispersal process does not require energy. The molecules just try to move freely in the space available. As a result, diffusion occurs. The same process is seen when gas or water molecules travel across the plasma membrane of a body cell. Take CO2 as an example. When cells undergo cellular respiration, a lot of CO2 accumulates in the cells. On the other hand, there is a very little CO2 present outside the cell. Hence, the CO2 molecules move outside the cells. Now, very little oxygen left after respiration in the cells. So, the oxygen from the outside, the cells moves through the plasma membrane to compensate the lost oxygen. That means, carbon dioxide moves out and oxygen moves in. Both the gaseous molecules move from the area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration, and this diffusion process does not require energy. Through diffusion, several molecules are carried out across the cell membrane. Home fund. First question, which organ and organ system help to maintain homeostasis? Second question, differentiate between inhalation and exhalation. Third question, explain the mechanism of breathing. Thank you.